Hey guys, here we go into round one of Guillermo Rigondeaux versus, I think his name is James Dickens. This is the last southpaw fight that Guillermo Rigondeaux had. First off, I'd like to say that Box Nation owns the rights to the film being used. My use of it is protected under the Fair Use Act, and in no way, shape, or form am I trying to undermine the rights that they have to the fight. I'm trying to give a unique and different perspective for educational purposes in the sport of boxing. And my use of this video clip is protected under the Fair Use Act. Anyway, the reason we're using this fight, he does have a couple of older ones. He has like another one that he knocks the guy in the first round out. I was going to make like a satirical video about it, making fun of the fact that he knocks the guy out, but he kind of like headbutts the guy, and then they get into like he like falls down, I think, from the headbutt, and then he gets up, and like I don't know if he got an 8 count or whatever the deal was, I don't remember. But then when he gets up, Guillermo Rigondeaux goes and touches gloves with him real quick, and then punches him in the face and knocks him out with one punch. But very reminiscent of Floyd Mayweather versus Victor Ortiz. Not quite as dirty, you know. When you're the person in the ring, things happen kind of fast, so maybe there's some plausible deniability. And to be honest, I'd tell you guys to go watch the fight, but it's like 50 seconds long, and you know it ends off that one punch, and then it's a knockout, you know. But it would have been a funny satirical video to kind of poke fun at it. Hopefully nothing like that winds up happening in the Lomachenko fight, and I don't even think it possibly could. The headbutt part, you know. I don't think there'll be a lot of opportunities or reasons for them to be touching gloves, so I don't think that he's a dirty fighter or nothing, you know, but it's not going to be relevant. There are some things that will be relevant that we're going to talk about. You know, Lomachenko dipping below the waist. He does that sometimes. Or not Lomachenko, Rigondeaux dipping below the waist. But I'm going to try and do something a little bit different with this film study. I think I tried it before, and just my natural tendency to kind of drone on and talk about bullshit, you know, just gets the best of me. Again, I love talking about boxing. I love, like, boxing theory and a lot of the interesting things that happen in the fight and in the rounds. Like, when I pick up on them, right, I'm just like, oh, wow, that's amazing because of all these things, and I just kind of go on these tangents. I don't do notes, you know. Sometimes I'll watch the round before. With fighters like Lomachenko, I have to watch the round a couple of times to be like, oh man, what's going on? Because he just does so many fucking things. And same thing with Rigondeaux, you know. He's just so crafty, so well schooled that I really don't want to miss anything. So maybe I should do notes for these kind of fighters. But anyway, I'm going to try and kind of go over over what they're doing, and then I'll kind of maybe do a replay and do it more in depth, and we'll see how this video goes. I'm not even, to be honest, while I'm saying this, I might start doing that and then just scrap the whole video, so and then you won't hear any of this, but I don't know, maybe you will, and we'll see how it goes. But anyway, this fight does end in a second round knockout. It's at the end of the second round. He doesn't come out for the third, so we're going to take a look at what he does. And maybe I'll do a couple more rounds of Lomachenko. But there's another fight that he did, 7 years ago in 2010 against Ricardo Cordoba, in which Guillermo Rigondeaux actually gets knocked down. You know, he fought. He was another fellow southpaw. But I chose not to do that video, not to do that fight, because it's so long ago. You know, and it's hard to say, like, oh, is 7 years really that long in Rigondeaux's world, right? In his world of boxing, it hasn't been that many fights. I think he's had 10 more fights since then. Oh my God, imagine how crazy that is. And isn't he 17-0? Like, he still has under 20 fights. You know, he's averaged 1.2 fights or 1.3 fights a year. Anyway, how much has he changed in the 7 years? Probably a pretty decent amount. So we're just going to go with this video. Maybe if there's some interest, you know, and you guys are interested in doing that, you know, it is going to be not an old Rigondeaux, but it's a past Rigondeaux. You know, he's a different fighter because he's trained with different people. He's trained with different coaches. He's just different fighter. So I don't think doing a fight on him would be nearly as relevant as doing one that, oh man, 5 minutes into this shit already and I haven't even started. So sorry guys, getting into it. And like I said, I'm going to try and do something a little differently. So, establishing the lead hand, and then right there you see Dickens kind of feint him low, right? And Lomachenko, or Rigondeaux, immediately responds by bringing his hand low, thinking it's going to be a body shot. Some feinting from him. And when he goes low with the jab, because he's already showed the tendency to go low, Rigondeaux is very easily able to block the shot, and whether it's completely blocked or not, who knows? You can't really tell from this angle, but it does look like he gets a piece of it. Jabbing, and look at how far away he is with this jab. I wonder what he thinks he's accomplishing by shooting it from so far away. And he's not stepping with it. He's just kind of poking it out there, right? Like a probing kind of jab, but he's not looking to put any pressure on, right? James Dickens feinting low. And look at how much Rigondeaux reacts, respecting the feints, respecting them. And then Rigondeaux just catching him in transition as he's trying to walk off the line. He kind of gives him a little feint right there. And then crowds him. And as he's turning on the line, throws a jab to the body, which Dickens sees coming. Rigondeaux shooting the jab. And then you see right there that Dickens tries to counter the jab, right? Really interesting, right? Because most people think of Rigondeaux as being the counterpuncher. But Rigondeaux does actually try to counter the counter, right? But notice this is also not a probing jab, right? He's not ready to throw another punch. He's kind of just feeling out Dickens in that regard. And then Rigondeaux watching, and it's really interesting. Look at how much Dickens is getting away with the probing, right? Just kind of pawing out there, not really shooting it. And okay, I'm going to try to I'll come back and talk about that stuff. But getting away with it. And now right here, this is really interesting. He shoots that jab, and I think that this is kind of a misstep on his part. He touches the glove with Dickens, and God, I hope I'm saying his name right. But he kind of touches gloves with him on accident, and I think he was trying to feint a jab, like he was shooting a jab to get Dickens to throw another jab with him, just like in this sequence. Just like in this sequence where he shoots the jab and Dickens tries to counter the jab. I think he tries to do the same thing and gets him to jab with him so he can catch him with a right hook instead. But but interestingly enough, Dickens not really fighting off of everything that Rigondeaux is doing. And then right here, again Rigondeaux tries to shoot the jab, right? Not a real jab, but Dickens comes in and shoots his own jab and catches Rigondeaux, and then Rigondeaux fires back with his own jab again. Very similar to the first jab exchange, right? But why didn't... I'm curious because I couldn't find a pattern in which Dickens was not countering the previous jab feint, but maybe there's a good reason. And now here you have Rigondeaux probing with the jab, right? He's like, okay, I'm waiting for the counter, right? And he's trying to bait Dickens into shooting the jab so that he can counter it. And as you see, he goes for the feint, right? And then he gives him a real jab, and then expects Dickens to counter with his own jab. He ducks down to the outside, very smart, and then shoots an uppercut. Now, even though it doesn't matter, or it doesn't land, it's very important to notice this, because this is one of the tools that he's using to try and take away Dickens' counter jab, right? To stop him so that he can continue to establish control, right? And like, this is probably one of the most important aspects of the entire altercation that's going to happen between him and Lomachenko. And we'll come back to that. I guess this is something that I'll come back to at the end of the round. Hopefully I remember, but I'll do more. I'll elaborate more on that at the end of the round. But interesting. Now, here you have Dickens shooting the jab, and Rigondeaux just ducking, putting all his weight on his back leg, right, so he could come over the top with the left hand, right? He could do anything, right? But he gets, he sees the jab coming. He knows that Dickens is about to start jabbing, and he gets ducked down into that out of position, and then just rolls under this jab, and Dickens kind of controls him, but Rigondeaux's doing a good job of maintaining composure, not like, getting freaked out right there and grabbing him and, coming up with his head. And more probing from Rigondeaux. And it looks like, as you can see, right, he's here. Whoops, maybe it's back here. He's leaning forward sometimes into his probing, and he's definitely trying to bait more jabs out of Dickens. But unfortunately, I don't think he knows what to do when Dickens doesn't take the bait, right? As you can see, he's not really shooting his jab to land his jab. And normally that's pretty common with a southpaw versus an orthodox fighter. They won't use the jab as much to actually land it. They'll use it like more like a cross and kind of go over the top of their opponent's jab, or just straight up throwing the right hook, right? But Rigondeaux not using his jab to actually land it, right? Just trying to bait jabs from Dickens so far. And interesting, I wonder why he finally gets him to bait. He finally baits him into shooting a jab, and then kind of just resigns to slipping the jabs and slipping the counters from Dickens. And I'm really curious as to why. And then very interesting, shoots the jab, and again, right, jabs with him, sees that Dickens is jabbing with him now, and then shoots another jab and tries to come over the top with the straight left. And beautiful fucking punch technique. Just amazing. Like, look at the trajectory of where he would have landed it and where his elbow is pointing and where he's driving all the power through. This guy has some serious power and fantastic punch technique. That's something that's like, I don't know, aside from his like understanding of positioning, that's like, I don't know how to say it, but just amazing punch technique. Every punch that he throws just has like fucking thunder on it. But interestingly, like, and I guess I can talk about this more later too. And again, I don't know what the fuck it is that Dickens sees that he knows that these are traps, right? So he's evaded 2 traps so far, right after 2 instances in which he was nearly perfectly set up, right? Not countering the jab right there because Dickens is going first, but even when he's getting baited into it and it's set up nearly perfectly, right, he's not falling for the traps. I wonder if there's something that Dickens sees, or he knows that Rigondeaux, by this point, he knows that Rigondeaux's trying to get him to shoot the jab so he can counter over it or under it or whatever. And again, right there, jabbing with him and trying to catch him over the top of his jab. And so far, that's the only thing that Rigondeaux has really tried to do. He hasn't even actually tried to, how do I say it? Counter Dickens. If you notice, when Dickens is going first, he doesn't try to counter the punches that Dickens is using, which is really interesting because normally Rigondeaux is known as a counterpuncher, but in this case, he's not even counterpunching. He is doing the feints and the probes, right? Probing and trying to bait punches from his opponent, but any punches that are not like specifically pulled from him with the probes, he's not electing to counter on. And then here you have Dickens setting up a jab to the body and doing a pretty decent job. If you notice, like earlier in the fight, he's standing up really high, right? And now he's kind of got his weight on his left leg right here, and he's kind of low, right? And he's jabbing up, and then it makes it for a much easier transition for him to go low and jab to the body compared to how he was. See, like right now when he was standing straight up, and now he's like a little lower, kind of telegraphing also that he's going to be going to the body, and that's something that Rigondeaux is probably going to be able to pick up on too, is noticing how low he is and how much more he's going to be going to the body. And as you can see also right here, probing, and Dickens comes in and he feints down, and you can see Rigondeaux swatting the jab down, right? If the jab to the body came, he would have been prepared for it in this little clip right here. Boom, dragging his hand down. But interestingly enough, he's got this probe in Dickens' face, but he's not hitting, he's not just shooting it as a jab at Dickens, which is one of the things that makes probing so effective, is once your opponent stops respecting it as a feint, stops respecting it as a setup, right? He's like, or starts over respecting it, being like, oh, I know he's just trying to do something else. That's your opportunity to actually use it as a punch. But again, trying to bait him into shooting the jab, right, with the 1-2, and it doesn't work again. Dickens sees something that I don't see, and able to stop himself from falling for these traps. Maybe he's realized, again, that is so far Rigondeaux's only game plan, is to bait him into a shot and then counter that shot. But interestingly enough, Rigondeaux not really prepared to throw punches on his own. Not really prepared to counter his punches on his own. And now we've got him coming in. And it's interesting, like, his hand is so low right here. Okay, now he brings it up, touches gloves with him, and I think that first left hand might even land, right? He gets him again. Whoops, I missed the fucking frame. So he's bringing his glove out. Then he goes to touch gloves with Rigondeaux, right? Very classic. I love this. And he swats his hand down, right? And then comes over the top with the left hand, and it looks like it just barely touches him, right? And then he comes in with the sweeping right hook, and then the straight left hand over the top. And look at the trajectory of that punch, man. That is just massive, a massive punch. All his knuckles are in line with the way that his elbow is coming through the punch, right? Beautiful punch technique, and he just crashes into him. And it kind of, as you can see, it kind of makes him stumble. But beautiful setup right there. Very patient, very deliberate style of setting up his punch right here, drawing the lead hand out from Dickens and then swatting it down and going over the top, and then punching in combination, after kind of catching him with that, I don't know how you say it, but continuing the offense, especially after having seen instances where Dickens doesn't do anything after a combination, right, or an attempt, right? So he comes in here, boom, and what does Dickens do? Does he counter? No. So Rigondeaux knows that Dickens is not looking to counter off those combinations. He's just going to circle out, and he catches him slipping. He catches him off guard because of the fact that Dickens doesn't have any, defensive responsibility, right? And I think Floyd Mayweather is probably the greatest example of that. Whenever you see Floyd Mayweather throw a right hand at his opponent, boom, a lead right hand, and then just roll under. Even if his opponent doesn't throw a left hook, he's always rolling anyway, and that's defensive responsibility. Respecting the craft of your opponent, even more so than not, I don't want to say than you have to, right? But giving your opponent the credit enough to know that he wants to hurt you, and knowing when those opportunities are, and not even giving your opponent those kind of free ones. I don't want to say free, but anyway. I don't know a better way to explain it other than that. Anyway, sorry, post breakdown. Now again, probing with the lead hand, gets him to react, and then tries to come in with the left hook instead. Interesting. I wonder what made him think that he could catch him with the left hook right there, right? When he's getting him to reach with the lead hand, he could have caught him with the straight left instead of the right hook right there. So I wonder what made him decide to throw the right hook instead. Maybe he thinks he was being too predictable with the lead left hand, right? Or the setup of the left hand. But this does look like it would have been a perfect opportunity for him to land it, because he draws his hand back out and could have caught him with it. But again, right here, going to the body, catching him with the shot, and not really in a position to counter, not really looking to counter, but getting a shot in right there, because Dickens kind of stays there, right? Defensive responsibility, and he just creates a little bit of space, and it's not the cleanest punch, right? But he knows where his opportunity is. Countering his jab. And, I think that's, one of the first real counter punches that he's kind of thrown. The other punches have been like him jabbing, then Dickens jabbing after his jab, and him countering counters, right? But that's his first real counter punch. And now, I can't really see it doesn't look like he's doing anything with his hand. He just kind of explodes out of his guard, and very intelligently goes to the body with this left hand, because he knows that he's protecting his chin now. Rigondeaux has kind of shown his hand, so he's kind of switching up his offense now and throwing a body shot, which I like. I like that he's doing that. I don't know, again, I don't know what the right hook was for, but that's not important. It is important to note that he's not using the same methods of offense that are predictable, and that's going to be something that's very important for him to do when he's fighting Lomachenko, because Lomachenko picks up on patterns and combinations so well. Again, so flashes the lead hand, figures out what Dickens is trying to do, and then just goes in and lands a body shot, with the left hand. Figures out that he's trying to pick up his high guard, and again, so bringing his guard up, and then flashing in, letting him know he's throwing a punch. And I'm not sure why he's leading with the right hook. It didn't look like he was set up for it very well. Maybe he's actually trying to hit Dickens' right hand away from his face so that he can land the overhand left. And that's probably it. If you notice, it does smack his hand away, and he almost does wind up landing that left hand. So that's probably what he's doing. So very interesting technique right there. But then again, Rigondeaux not really counterpunching, right? Dickens is nearly completely out of position. He does have some defensive responsibility in this regard when he throws that wild right hook. Rigo is able to get under, body up with him a little bit, and keep control of him, which is very good. Something that he hasn't really shown so far in this round, not because he doesn't have the skill, but because he hasn't had to. But he doesn't go for a straight left over the top, right? Even though Dickens is kind of out of position. Not really trying to counter him. And then I wonder what Rigo's trying to set up here. Is he trying to set up a pull counter? Obviously, he's still trying to fight off of Dickens' jab and trying to bait his jab. Even when he goes with this body shot right there, he's not really committed to it. It's kind of a probing shot. Now he's probing with the lead inside step, right? Slipping on the inside. Very like Lomachenko, right? But a little more hesitant. And Dickens kind of almost catches him with the shot. And there he gets it, right? He gets him to bring his hand away from his head and catches him with the jab. Oh. All right, sorry. I got a text. My bad. And again, Rigondeaux getting a look at Dickens and not really countering, not really taking advantage of the wild openings, right? Obviously, you don't want to put yourself so out of position if you don't know what punches your opponent's about to throw, right? And he doesn't. He doesn't have any idea what Dickens is going to do right here. So, playing it safe, using his, I'll say his C-level defense, just slipping punches, right? Not controlling Dickens, not bodying up with him. But then he does come in here, right here, and Dickens does the smart thing and kind of controls him so he can't come up with a punch, right? And this is exactly what I expect Lomachenko to do every single time Rigondeaux ducks down like that. And I think that might wind up being a contention for the fight. I do appreciate that Lomachenko doesn't throw punches when he has his opponent down like that, right? But I do think that this might be a contention for the actual fight. And Rigondeaux complaining about him getting on his head, because that is something that I do expect him to do. But I don't think that Lomachenko is going to be doing it to be dirty, but just to protect himself from headbutts and stuff. But anyway, I'm going to kind of go back through. Ooh, good job right there from Rigondeaux. Coming in, baiting the jab, catching him with the right hook, and then almost catching him with the left hand over the top. And again, all off of just trying to bait Dickens' lead hand, trying to bait Dickens into throwing a jab. And one of the interesting things about this round is if Dickens is not throwing a jab, if he's not jabbing, if he's not throwing punches, what is Rigondeaux doing? What is he trying to set up? And it's really interesting because when Gary Russell Jr. is fighting, and I guess this is where we'll get into the rest of the stuff that I want to be talking about for this round in particular, going back through it, even though it took 25 fucking minutes still. When Lomachenko is fighting and he's fighting Gary Russell Jr. and Gary Russell Jr. is not throwing punches, Lomachenko was setting up other punches, right? Slipping to the inside to throw a right hook to the body. You know, changing levels to bring Gary Russell Jr.'s hands down so he can land shots to the head. Changing levels, getting Gary Russell Jr. to bring his hands up so he can land shots to the body. You know, we have a clear and I don't want to say obvious, right? But a clear and definable craft of what he's trying to do. And I don't really get the sense that Rigondeaux has a craft that he's looking to set up, right? Like specific strategy, right? It looks so far that he's trying to fight off of his opponent's jab by baiting it to counter it, you know, and to kind of take that away from him, right? And now one of the reasons why this is so interesting, right, is because that's something that's very likely to happen in the fight with him between him and Lomachenko, is taking away the lead hand dominance. Now, in boxing, it's important to have good tools, right? It's important to be, you know, have good technique to throw a good jab, a good right hand, a left hook, a right hook, an uppercut, you know, an uppercut with both hands. All that stuff is really important. Those are your tools, right? Then there's what you do with your tools, right? Setting up your punches. You know, are you able to set up your punches? Do you know how to set up your punches? You know, so far, Rigondeaux showing that he can set up his overhand left by baiting his opponent's jab, right? Getting his opponent to jab with him. But a little caveat in that is that when he's not baiting his opponent's jab, he doesn't exactly know what to do, right? Like, he was flashing the lead hand, getting Dickens to kind of shell up, and then he could throw a body shot, right? Or flashing the jab, and then when he wouldn't react, he would throw a right hook to kind of open his guard or split his guard, and then throw the left hand over the top and try to get it in while he's splitting the guard, you know, but not really looking to do anything like so far outside of that spectrum, whereas Lomachenko's is very obvious. You know, he doesn't need you to be making mistakes for him to be setting his offense up, because he's constantly looking for you to make different mistakes. And so far, Rigondeaux, you know, maybe he's just happy with the mistakes that he's able to make. That he's happy with the mistakes that he's able to get Dickens to make, or maybe he doesn't know what other mistakes he needs to be getting him to make, right? But so far, it's a very narrow source of offense for him. And one of the reasons why that is so important is because it is predicated off of his lead hand. And that's something that's really interesting, because both Lomachenko and so far we've seen Rigondeaux try to use the probes, right, to get his opponent to react. And I think Rigondeaux's are more like feints than they are probes, because of the fact that he's not, like, I define a probe being like, you throw the punch, right, like right here, he uses the probe, right, and he thinks he knows, based on previous altercations, how Dickens is going to react, but Dickens doesn't react in the way that he thinks he was, right? Whereas in a probe, you put it out there, and then you see how your opponent's reacting, and you counter that, right? So how do you counter your opponent just pulling back? Well, you don't throw your hook, first off, right? But you wait for your opponent to react to the probe before letting your offense go, and making sure that your offense lines up with what you're able to counter on your opponent. Now, the reason, and I said this like 3 times already, but I haven't actually gotten to the fucking point. Sorry. The reason that this is all so important is because the most important thing in boxing, right? So the tools, right? Knowing what to do with your tools, right? Being fast, hitting hard, having good punch technique, just having good technique for everything that you do. And then knowing what to do with all of that technique, knowing how to set up your punches, what punches you're setting up. But then the most important is the space between you, right? Who controls that space? Even a worse fighter who has control of that space is going to do better than a fighter who has better tools, who has better technique, who's a harder puncher, who's faster, But if they don't have control of that space in between them, they're not going to do as well in the fight. That space in between you is where you do all of your work, right? And what he's trying to do here is he's trying to take control of that space from Dickens by baiting his jab, right? The jab is like the most common way to control that space, right? Like Lomachenko does it with his feints, with his probes, with his lead hand, but he also does it with his head movement, right? Slipping to the inside, slipping to the outside, right? He uses that to set up his punches, right? Changing levels, right? Whereas Rigondeaux right here is using his lead hand, right? You see him poking and prodding at him, probing, and then trying to bait Dickens into trying to contest that area between them, right? So as soon as he gets Dickens to put his hand out there to be like, whoa, you don't get to control this area, he's trying to do that so he can punch him in the face, right? He's trying to land his offense so that he can stop Dickens from taking that real estate, from controlling that area. That's where you do all your work. That's where you do your probing. That's where you do your feinting. That's where you use your head movement. That's where you change levels. And if one fighter has control of it and another doesn't, they don't have any opportunities to feint, to probe, to slip to the inside, to slip to the outside, to take angles on your opponent, because you have all the control of that space, right? And that's going to be one of the very, very interesting narratives between Lomachenko and Rigondeaux, because Rigondeaux is very, very clearly very talented at fighting over that space. Now, I don't know that he's as good at utilizing that space as Lomachenko, as I talked about just a few seconds ago. Lomachenko has a much broader sense of he has many more options when he has control of that space, or even gaining control of that space. He has many more, but as you can see, Rigondeaux is very good at setting traps for the kinds of control that his opponent is trying to put against him, right? Or like controlling that space, right? So that's going to be really interesting to see how Lomachenko and Rigondeaux kind of fight for it in the early rounds. And that might lead to some, I don't want to say like slow, right? Because nothing with Lomachenko is ever slow paced, right? But because of the fact that Rigondeaux is so sharp and is so quick and has great positioning, right? As you can see with like stuff like this, right? When punches and stuff do come, he's able to just slip and roll and then just easily come up in punching position, ready to throw punches. Because he's so good at that, it's going to be very interesting to see where Lomachenko is able to go when Rigondeaux is pivoting. I wish their names weren't so difficult, Loma and Rigo. But anyway, it's going to be very interesting to see, and I don't know exactly who's going to have the upper hand. My guess so far still is Lomachenko, because of the variety that he has of ways to set it up and ways to maintain control, ways to gain control. And it's just he has so much more variety in that aspect than it looks like Rigondeaux has. Like, he's got a couple of punches, but it's all based off of his lead hand, right? Another thing that I want to talk about while we're doing this is Rigondeaux's guard, right? If you look just in this last 15 seconds, only watch Rigondeaux's left hand and his head. It's almost in the same spot the entire time. You know, a little bit of level changing, right? Which is brought on by Dickens feinting him low, right? Ducking low and getting him to change levels. But no, it's not voluntary, right? It's all reactionary. And that's something that I really worry about for Rigondeaux, because of the fact that it's so easy to get him out of position. If you notice, like right at the beginning of the fight, right? Whoops. Right at the beginning of the fight, he's able to bring his hands low, right? He's able to get him to bring his hands low, and that's going to be something that'll be very dangerous for him when fighting Lomachenko, because when Lomachenko slips to the inside, the motion is exactly the same as when he's throwing a right hand versus when he's slipping on the inside. And if Rigondeaux ever misreads that, he might wind up taking a huge shot. Again, Dickens is able to get Rigondeaux to change levels with him almost at will, simply by feinting to the body, right? or to just by slightly bending his knees, he's able to get all that reaction from Rigondeaux. And that's a product of, right here, Rigondeaux not really having control of the space between them, right? He's using his probe a little bit, right, to kind of feel Dickens out, but he's not maintaining control. He's not being very active in that space to maintain the control over it. And that's something that Lomachenko does extremely well. And he's not, even though he's not using the same tactic over and over and over again, it is a fundamental difference between them. Like right here, right? He's allowing Dickens to have control of that space, right? Obviously, Dickens is fucking scared shitless to get cracked by that left hand, right? So he doesn't take advantage of the control that he has over this space, right? But like right there, if he would have thrown an overhand left, right when Rigondeaux dipped down onto the body, or dipped down changing levels, you know, he could have landed a great shot, right? And he could have hit it. He could have hit that shot with a level change, just like he had been giving him with the lead hand, right? It's really interesting, and I wonder if there are going to be other things that I pick up, because it's unfortunate because there's only 2 rounds, right? So I have to kind of pick up all of the things that I need to know about Rigondeaux in just these 2 rounds, fighting a left-handed fighter. So I can't go on and watch and be like, oh, in the 6th round he did this. Oh, I remember that from round 1. That's why he was doing A, B, and C. You know, so we're not going to get a full spectrum of his craft and what he's trying to accomplish. But so far, most of it seems to be aimed at not allowing Dickens to have control of the space between them by baiting his lead hand and just countering it, and not really knowing what to do with that space once he has control of it, aside from, like, you know, just flashing his lead hand and throwing a body shot, you know, like a Canelo type offense. But, you know, regardless, a huge power puncher. It's going to be a very dangerous fight for Loma, except for the fact that, you know, he might be a little small. That's what everybody's saying. I don't really think that that's going to have like too much of an impact on it, because this guy's been fighting his whole life. He has fantastic punch technique, and I think that that's going to carry much more weight into his punches and it's not going to matter that he's not as big, because he's going to have great punch technique regardless. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Again, if you guys have listened this far, be nice in the comments, man. I forgot to say that shit at the beginning of this. Be nice in the comments. You know, if you want to debate, if you want to say some stuff, like, I'm happy to debate and talk boxing, or talk about what we're talking about right here. And the reason also why I started talking about more in depth about the clash between Loma and Rigo is because we've already done film study on Loma, right? And now we're figuring out who Rigondeaux is when he's fighting a fellow southpaw, and we're gonna mash those together as we do his film study, right? Maybe I should have started on Rigondeaux. I don't know. I like watching Lomachenko better personally, so I was much more excited about that. But yeah, so we're gonna be kind of mashing them together. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on controlling the middle, controlling the space between them. And again, that is the most important part about boxing. That's where you do all your work, right? That's where you do your feinting. That's where you do your setting up of all your shots. Like right here, he gets him to commit to it, remember? Oh wait, was it not right there? Maybe it was somewhere else. I don't fucking know. It doesn't matter. But that's where you do all your work, right? The work is not actually punching your opponent in the face. The work is in the setup. It's the feints, the probes, it's the level changes, it's slipping to the inside, to the outside, like whatever it is that you're doing to set your punches up, that's the work, right? Oh, it's right here. Yeah, and he lands that left hand, and then this left hand right there that definitely wobbles him. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And again, thanks to everyone who's been liking the videos, who all the new subscribers, the old subscribers. I appreciate your guys' support, and that you guys are interested in my content and what I have to say about boxing. Anyway, thanks guys.